Ahoy there, today on the Red Sea, managers out there in Reddit land, what's your best ... And so I had to fire the guy story. I used to run a sports bar a few nights a week. One night when I was off, and the owner was supposed to be there running things, I got a call from one of the bartenders telling me that I needed to come in. When I got there, the owner was sitting in a booth in the back corner, passed out drunk. One of the bartenders was so drunk he was staggering around breaking things. The kitchen staff had walked out. One of the waitresses had burned herself trying to cook something, and the doorman was apologizing to an irate group of sports fans. Apparently the owner and the drunk bartender had started pounding shots. The owner got drunk and screamed at everybody. The cook and dishwasher walked out with food still on the grill. I sent the drunk bartender home, sent the waitress to the cooked up a bunch of the food that was prepped, and sent it out camped. Closed the kitchen, camped around for the house, and we ended up having a fun night. Did not make any money for the owner, but it was fun. After we closed, I took the owner home, and by then he was sober enough to be remorseful. He decided on the spot to hire me as full-time manager, asked me to hire an assistant, and pretty much stayed out of the place from then on. In effect, I fired the owner. I was a manager in a bank. We had a mandatory 3-day training before the person could start working in the branch. I got a call in the middle of the first day of training for my new hire. The trainer was asking where she was. I called her cell and she said, "Well, it snowed a lot last night, so I assumed the training would be cancelled. It'll just show up tomorrow." I told her that we would need to have her start the following week because all 3 days needed to be completed in order. She told me that would not work because she had a 5-day Vegas vacation set next week. Never told me when we told her the start date. I should have fired her right there, but we did not have many good applicants, so I gave her one more chance. I told her that no matter what, be at training. Next week, I got a call from the trainer asking where she was again. I called her and she said, "My flight back from Vegas got delayed and I only had like 3 hours of sleep. I did not want to show up tired and make a bad impression, so I fired her." I was supervising a call center where the agents did market research surveys. One of the new guys from the recent training class had been working for a few days and had yet to even get decently into a survey with anyone. Like, he'd sit there for 4 hours at a time doing nothing but occasionally throwing out an intro. But, since he was a quiet kid and did not complain, I spent more time with the others in his training group and did not focus on his lack of production until about his 3rd day. I just wanted to hear how he was pitching the survey to give him some pointers. So I tap in. They cannot tell if we are listening in, and I was on the other side of the room. First call, answering machine. Second call, and old man answers hello, and the trainee says, "I know where you live, pussy, B-E-Arch," and hangs up. It took me a minute to compose myself. But I asked him to come into my office and told him, "Yeah, you cannot work here anymore." I had this girl working for me as a lab technician. She was this little Chinese girl, 7 months pregnant, really nice. One day she comes up to my office crying her purse had been stolen from her locker. The lock had been cut. It contained her cell phone, car keys, green card, money, everything. Apparently it is very expensive to replace a lost green card. She said it was $400+. Also, since her car keys were now gone, she had no way to drive home. She lived 50 miles away. Keep in mind, 7 months pregnant. So her husband had to leave his job to bring her the spare keys so she could drive her car home. Meanwhile, I review the security tapes with HR and lo and behold, we caught a girl on camera with a ducking pair of bolt cutters going into the locker room. The girl we saw on the tape was one of the other lab technicians, my employee, and someone the victim worked with every single day. We used the company bolt cutters to get into her locker, and we found the bolt cutters she had used. We also found food and a bunch of other malarkey she was not allowed to have in her locker. At that point we did not need to prove the theft to fire her, but we were going to try anyway. The next day she comes in to get her check and we bring her into HR and show her the bolt cutters. She admits that she took the purse, took the money and credit cards, and threw the rest in the trash. We tell her that she is fired and to please wait while we write her another check so she will not have to come back in next week to pick up her last check. While she was waiting, we called the cops who came and arrested her. She took the cop back to her apartment where she gave them the purse which she had not thrown in the trash after all. She ended up getting deported to Mexico. The boss' son decided he wanted to be a graphic designer, but he had this problem: he always had other things to do on deadline day. Once a week, we put out the paper, and it usually involves 10, 12 grueling hours of work. He always had some lengthy errand to run. And because his father was never around, he kept doing this, leaving me to do all the work. Finally his dad tells him he has to stay at work and can only leave if I give him permission. The very next deadline, he asks to leave for the afternoon. Call your dad. I told him. I'm not asking dad. I'm asking you, he says. Then the answer is no. He got highly pissed off and finally yelled at me. Your attitude sucks. 2 days later, he waltzes in, sits down, puts his feet up on his desk and his hands behind his head and says, "We need to talk about your attitude." Somehow, I refrained from killing him. But I told him I would never speak to him again. His father backed me up, and he was done. Last I heard, the entitled little malarkey manages a Radio Shack. Perfect fit. I did not actually fire the guy. I did not get the chance. He starts work at 10 AM in the supermarket I manage. At 10:04 I ask him to bring a case of Coke from the storeroom and put it on the shelf. At 10:06 he comes back from the store without the Coke and said I did not know this would involve manual labor and promptly left. 6 minutes total employment time. Has to be some kind of record. Similar to your shortest employment ever. Although I did get to fire the guy. Used to work retail, and every holiday season we would bring on a bunch of new sales staff to keep up with the crowds. This particular new hire, let's call him Bob, aced the interview. Well dressed, well informed, affable, etc. And to be honest, when you're hiring seasonal staff you're not looking for the best of the best. Just warm bodies to fill space. So Bob was a dream. Bob shows up for his first day at 9 AM, a full hour before the store opens. Pre-open generally involves a bit of tidying, making change for the registers etc. As the only manager in the store, I was in charge of the registers, while I'm busy flipping 50s for 20s and 10s. Bob's a few feet away folding shirts, so I drop a roll of pennies and then bend over to pick them up. When I stand back up, Bob's on the other side of the counter stuffing the stack of $50s I had just pulled from the registers into his pocket. He did not even try to make an excuse, just gave me a whoops look and silently put the stack back on the counter. Within 5 minutes he had signed his termination papers and was out the door. Total employment time, 10 minutes. Had to fire a guy who was caught jacking off at his desk, working in an open plan office. Got caught out by an admin lady sitting opposite him, looking into his internet history. He was reading text-based incest erotica at the time. Used to manage a pizza joint years ago, and another manager hired this Chigallo. My first time working a shift with the guy, he was practically sleeping on the counter. I told him he needed to get to work, and he blew up, walking around the store, stomping his feet, taking his shirt off, wanting to fight me in front of customers. I'm an ex-bouncer and I don't take any malarkey from guys like that, and called his bluff. He ended up leaving, accidentally hitting another delivery driver's car as he sped out of the parking lot. Do I really need to tell you he was fired? I was working in a manufacturing facility and had just brought in some temporary labor. This particular temp was someone I'd only worked with a couple of times before, but he seemed like a switched on guy, math student doing graduate work, if I remember correctly. Anyways, I bring the guy in, go over the related safety talk with him, and walk him to where we will be working in the welding area of the plant. Our parts were not there yet, so I asked him to stay and wait for a few minutes while I went to go get them. 5 minutes go by and my phone rings. It's a superior in the plant telling me I have to see something, to meet them at their office, and that we'll be walking back to where I had left the temp. We get there, and has managed to stack some empty totes into a nice lounge chair for himself. Has removed his safety glasses, is holding his cell phone in one hand. Texting cell phones were banned on the floor, as I had just finished explaining to him, and has his other hand picking between his toes. Yes, he had taken off his safety boots and socks, in the middle of a welding shop, and was picking his toes. He even tried to start walking like that when we approached him. Needless to say, I ushered him out of the building and never worked with him again. I let myself get pressured by my boss into hiring a copywriter essentially because she had a huge rack. She did a couple of writing tests that came back okay and her attributed work on other sites and magazines was passable, so I did not fight it too much. First day on the job she announces that she is both dyslexic and suffers from adult attention deficit disorder and will need all sorts of special equipment to work with and longer deadlines to complete her work. Not really what you're looking for in a wordsmith. When I pointed that out, she rattled off a list of other companies that she was in the process of suing for unfair dismissal. Happily for me, she also began stalking someone else at work, ultimately sending him hundreds of sexually explicit text messages. So we were able to get rid of her that way. An employee, let's call him Bob, is out for a week, allegedly with an infection of some sort. Bob is a young guy in his early 20s and his mother called several times while he was out to keep me in the loop. One day Bob unexpectedly returned to work about 3 hours past the start of his normal shift. He tells me he is feeling better and wants to get back to work. He looks awful and I try to convince him to go home, but he insists on working, so I walk with him to his cubicle and ask him if he needs anything. He asks for a glass of orange juice and I happily run to the break room to get it for him. A half hour passes and another employee enters my office looking a bit concerned. He suggests I go check on Bob, saying he does not look well. Upon entering the area where Bob sits, I find him slumped over his desk, head down and eyes closed. I wake him up and tell him he needs to go home. He agrees, takes a sip of his orange juice and tells me he just feels awful that has been out of work for so long. I realize that letting him take the train home alone will not be safe, so I grab a nearby phone and call him a town car. I watch as Bob tries to stand up and collect his stuff. He can barely hold himself up, so I offer to help him down to the car. With Bob leaning on my shoulder, we begin to leave when I realize his backpack is still sitting under his desk. I suggest he hold onto the cubicle wall while I grab the backpack, and about 2 seconds after I walk away he stumbles, falls and slams his head hard on the corner of the cubicle. In a frantic moment I grab his backpack and rush back to help him up, as I'm investigating the massive red mark on Bob's forehead, which soon turned into a very impressive swollen mess. An empty bottle of vodka falls out of his backpack. Bob ISN not sick. Bob is wasted and I had given him the mixer for his screwdriver. Trying to stay calm and get Bob out of the building without the whole office knowing he is drunk, I help Bob down the hall to the elevator and we ride together to the lobby. His car is waiting for him at the curb and I ask a security guard to help me get him in the car since I can barely hold him up myself. Bob takes a seat behind the driver and immediately starts pulling on the driver's seat belt and spitting on the seat next to him. The driver quickly gets out and tells me he would not be taking Bob anywhere. I open Bob's door and try to help him out of the car, just to be greeted with "Don not ducking, touch me you faggot. I'll kill you if you touch me." I walk away, unsure what to do next, and watch as Bob falls out the car door and sprawls out on the sidewalk as a high-level executive from my company walks by and says, "Come to my office as soon as you're done here." Lovely. I hail a cab, but the driver takes one look at Bob and peels away. I cannot blame him. I see a police officer across the street and I run over asking for advice. The officer suggests I call 911, so I do. The cavalry arrives. Ambulance. Police cars. Fire truck included. Bob is angry, screaming at the cops and EMTs while they strap him to a gurney and secure him in the back of the ambulance. They tell me what hospital he's going to and take him away. I head back inside to call Bob's mother and let her know what happened. She's not surprised at all and admits she was fully aware of his alcohol problem. I walk up to the high-level exec's office and he immediately starts laughing as I enter. He just wanted the gossip. Obviously, Bob was fired. My boss actually had me send a courier with a termination letter to his hospital room, which I felt awful about. I only heard from Bob once after that day. He was in rehab and doing better, and he had called to ask if he could use me as a reference. A woman at my office was hired on as a software programmer. That was until our HR manager caught her hiding in the woman's bathroom with a very large how to do programming textbook. Turns out she had no ducking clue what she was doing. I once worked as a general manager of a construction company. I had a tile installer that worked for me for a couple of years. Near the end, he developed a bad drinking and drug problem. He once asked for extra money from a client because he said that I did not pay him. Not true. The client told me, and I told him I was going to have to remove him from the job site. He stole $400 in cash, and possibly a watch they were not sure, from one of the client's purses before he left, and I had to cut a check to her and apologize. We were nearly done there, so she let us finish the last few trimmings and shower door installation. It was a big, 3-month-long remodel, and there had not been a hint of an issue with any of the other, roughly 20 guys I had sent to her house. She wrote it off as one of those things and accepted my apologies. The worst part is, he was building a custom shower, which he did not waterproof. We later found the customer could have fallen through the 2nd story floor as the boards rotted. Luckily she called us because a tile was coming loose. I came out and just about had a heart attack when I saw nothing but tar paper under the tile. Under all the tiles. I began pulling them off with ease, one by one, and I was so mad that I tried to set up a meeting with the guy. His phone was disconnected. We had to redo an $18,000 Moroccan style shower room at our own cost. If I could find that guy, to this day, 5 years later, I would beat him senseless. I also had a guy come in every day and beg me for a job for almost a month straight. He came in every day at 9:0 AM, pleading for a job. I did not have any open spots. But when I did, I thought, this guy has determination, so I hired him. His first day on the job, he worked for 10 minutes, and then came into the office to use the bathroom. I stepped out for a few minutes to check on the yard, and when I came back, I assumed he had already went back out to the shop. A few hours later, one of the shop guys came in and said, I guess the new guy quit. He went to the bathroom and never came back. I proceeded to check to see if he was in the bathroom, and sure enough, he was passed out on the floor in the fetal position sleeping. I woke him up and asked what his problem was, and he said I took some bad drugs last night, and I do not feel good. To top it off, he stole 10 rolls of toilet paper and stuffed them down his pants. I told him to keep them and just get out. The next day, he tried to return to work like nothing happened. Though it was his first day, he did not remember anything about the day before. We hosted a networking breakfast every other month and my assistants had to meet me at 6:45 am to set up and check people in. This kid shows up 1/2 hour late, sits at the check-in table, and does not look at anyone. Just crosses his arms and looks pissed. I tell him to check people in, and he says it's too early for this. I do not even want to be here. I tell him then go home, and he picks up his jacket, walks up to me like he is going to say something / strike me, huffs and puffs and takes off. I get to the office at 9 AM, and has sitting at his desk like nothing happened. I tell him okay, guy, obviously you are fired. Let's pack your things up. He just started blankly at me and asked quietly why? I reply are you goddamn kidding me? Why would I want an assistant who I have to babysit? He replies yeah, you have a point and leaves. Simple really. He came to work stoned. Spent most of his time spinning a pen lid around in a bottle of water giggling and ordering in files from our Athens and Bangkok offices for no reason other than he thought the clients' names were hilarious. Easiest firing I ever did. My mom had to fire a woman who completely fabricated being pregnant. She was overweight, so I guess she thought she could get away with it. She accepted gifts from residents and staff. This is at an assisted living community, and planned on taking the maternity leave as a little vacation. Not sure what she planned on doing when she came back and had no baby. She got fired after bending over and picking up a box like it was nothing when she was supposedly 7 months along. Unfortunately it is the end of the video, but do not worry, there are many more coming. Like and subscribe for more videos from the Red Sea. Thanks for watching.